My guest today is Parker Harris, who started his first company at 17 years old. Parker also was recruited by the President of the United States to speak at leadership conferences across the country. And at 20 years old, he almost died in a car accident and made the choice to walk people out of his life that were taking advantage of him and start fresh. Hmm, this is Solomon's Talk. Welcome, Parker.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Okay, so I really appreciate you coming and talking to me. For me, it's the middle of my day, but I understand it's the end of your day, so we'll make this snappy while
Uh,
giving value
all
to our
good.
audience. Yeah, okay.
I
All
have
right,
I have a number of calls scheduled after this, so
oh,
we can go
wow.
as long as
Okay, okay, I appreciate you. All right, so before we get into it, tell us, who is Parker Harris?
who is Parker Harris. So um, I really think of myself first and foremost as a leader. That's something that I've always valued, and I'm someone that likes to create value for other people. And I started doing that in a nonprofit at an early age. I was really involved with the YMCA and some after school programs and just different nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started getting really interested in politics. And then I found out business was the place where I could add the most value. And I started trying to solve different problems in health. Initially, was the company that I started in 17 was a nutrition and health company. And and over time, I invested a lot into different personal development experiences, professional development experiences, and I noticed a lot of return from those investments of that time and that experience. But I think at the end of the day, the most valuable thing I got from those putting myself in those different spaces or different experiences was the people that I met. And I was fortunate enough over time to really be careful to curate who I brought into my life and made part of my inner circle. And that has been a really good decision for me, and is something that I now do full time is create a mastermind for entrepreneurs and executives to come together in a confidential environment to share different ideas, opportunities, and challenges, and get support and also be challenged by the other peers around the table. And so that's what I facilitate and lead. Is my main focus professionally.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing. And we will get into more about your work and what you can do for someone in our audience. So thank you for sharing that personal stuff. Now, when I first started Solo Mom's Talk, I hesitated to interview men because I'm like, what do they have to offer women? But I've learned from
Yeah,
experience that we're all human beings, and our human experience is what connects us. So, my first
and
question to yeah.
and
So
I
my
don't mean to interrupt you at all, but I think it's also like we all had a mother too, and I think
right.
we realized potentially how important that relationship is, and always I think for the most part want to support and it's probably the biggest responsibility in society is raising the next generation. And so I think it's important to add value and have dialogue and have conversations
Yes.
with a variety of ideas and experiences and backgrounds. And so I appreciate you having me on, and I'm hopeful that I can talk to the solo moms out there, without necessarily being a solo mom myself.
Yes, of course. We're not in a silo. So yes, of course. Thank you for coming. Okay, so my first question for you today is, tell us about the importance of walking people out of your life.
Yeah, this was something that wasn't natural to me. Growing up, I was an only child, and I was always looking for friends, and that cliche best friend, and even
Mm-hmm.
brothers and sisters. that, I could have that like familial bond with. And I switched schools a few times, and for a variety of reasons it was more challenging to find this in different environments. And especially within school, like, it wasn't a great experience for me. But outside of school, I found different avenues for it. But this was before social media, so it was more challenging to stay connected. And
Yes.
and eventually, over time, I found myself in relationships that really were not healthy, were not serving me. And, you know, looking back, I was being taken advantage of in a variety of different ways. And I decided, after that car accident that you mentioned and different experiences that happened, that I needed to make a shift, and these people weren't going to be part of that shift. And to confront that. And, in the situations that I was doing it, it was more like friendships, or, just different relationships, where I would literally, go on a walk and tell the person, like, hey, I'm going to be making some changes, and that's going to, require me to be spending less time with you. And I'm making a choice to walk you out of your life. And I think in those conversations, I probably cried more than they did. you know,
Yeah.
it was, definitely an emotional conversation. And for the most part, it was safe and healthy, which I'm grateful for. And I noticed, several of those people ended up making changes in their life later on over some timeline, and re-entered, my life at some point. But it was a period of time of creating space and new standards for myself. And, over time, it's I think it's, again, part of that leadership thing, right? It's like, when you're leading, you have to make decisions sometimes that are unpopular, but that are
Yes.
authentic. And sometimes that has a way of coming around, especially if we have our own best interests at heart, and other people's best interests at heart.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I like that idea. I like the concept because it's something we struggle with as solo moms. And I think it's something we struggle with as humans, as you say, if you come from a big family and there are always a lot of people around, you want to run away to quiet. But if you're not used to it, and you're alone all the time, you seek out relationships, and sometimes those relationships aren't necessarily good for you. And we have to learn, like you did, to how to extract ourselves from them so we can grow as people. So thank you.
It's I think there's this element too of, like, what are we really fearing? Like, what is the fear around the choice of walking someone out? And I think it's almost like deep, primitive, like primal, around, like, it's like tribal, right? Where it's like no one
Hmm.
wanted to be thrown out of the tribe.
Right.
Um, but I think it can be, it's the path less traveled, in a way. But there's so much power in surrounding ourselves with people that add value to different parts of our lives, even if it's just making us laugh, or there's like a joy
Yeah.
component. Um, and really, like, for me, like, I'm realizing, looking, even I'm 36 right now, and that I'm just starting to realize who I enjoy being around. I wasn't even like
Yeah.
aware of that for most of my life. And so,
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So during the time you discovered that you probably need to make some changes in your relationships, did you do some kind of work on self-awareness? Did you work on who you are as a person before you came to that decision?
yes, I started getting really interested in personal development. So I was raised in Catholic schools, and so I was in religion classes my entire life. and
Mm-hmm.
and then, as I started getting older, 15, 16, 17, I started actually reading scripture. And I feel like I got a lot of, like, wisdom and personal development from scripture, like, particularly like Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, like Solomon's writings, and
Wisdom.
then
Yeah.
yeah, right, and yeah, so that one, I think that's been part of my journey, was seeking wisdom more than gold, which is something that he describes, and just resonated with me, or at least I programmed myself, and then I started
Mm-hmm.
finding it in, you know, there's actually a book that's under Christian inspirational as well, called The Greatest Salesman in the World,
Mm-hmm.
by a guy named Og Mandino, and he
Yes.
also wrote Greatest Miracle in the World. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am. Yes. I'm a Tony
Yeah, it's
Robbins fan, so I hear about all the books.
yeah, right. So it almost created, I feel like there's this almost personal development lineage that I think really started with scripture, and then different philosophers came along
Yes.
and basically tried to democratize these ideas more and more, and then they just get said in different ways now. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the most challenging thing is to really get to know ourselves, because it's like almost, it's easy to talk about doing growth work and in this work, but like to almost do it superficially more than like really like digging deep.
Yes.
And so, I think that for me, where I get the most breakthrough around that is actually putting myself in different experiences, and and those experiences are either, some sort of like personal development experience, or something that's more of like an adventure, that like I've started to see, like, learn a lot about myself as an adult, um when I'm in these different experiences.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Excuse me. So, I'm going to switch gears now, and entrepreneurship and side hustle, working from home are all buzzwords that we sometimes have in this space, especially when you're a mom, working and trying to juggle kids. So, tell us how someone can prepare for becoming their own boss, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I ended up going into more of a corporate role, early on in my career. I worked for a large, Fortune 100 technology company, and and ended up creating some habits that didn't support me as an entrepreneur. And so I think there are some things like that we can do before becoming an entrepreneur that will help set us up for success. And I think two of them that come to mind right away is around our beliefs. And I think particularly the belief is like finding joy and adding value to other people is a really powerful belief to have as an entrepreneur, because essentially what it's really about is like solving someone else's problem and adding value to a person is the basic premise of entrepreneurship. And then another like foundational piece, and it kind of involves like the identity conversation, like who am I, who is Parker Harris, who is Rosemary Francis, like that, like the identity that we have for ourselves and the story that we're telling ourselves.
Hmm.
And I think many people are unconscious about that story that they're telling themselves, and it was almost written when they were like 5 to 7 years old, when they weren't really choosing that story, and potentially that story doesn't serve them. and
Yes.
and basically doing the work to identify what that story is, and to rewrite that story.
Yeah. That's an interesting concept because when we think of being an entrepreneur, we think of, I have an idea or a passion, and we think about banking, and we think about, income and revenue and expenses. And we seldom think about what you just talked about, how to prepare as a person, and your mindset has to shift, which I think is why a lot of entrepreneurs fail, because of not doing what you're talking about. So I do appreciate that, and I wanted you to touch on that mind the mindset change that we need. particularly. Um, apart from all the other stuff that we need to do, tangible things that we need to do, what one mindset shift that you think could improve our success as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, there's two that really come to mind that I think are, I think there's a lot of different conversations around this that are really powerful, and it's almost like a sequence. Like everybody is like a very complicated, like
Yes.
that. So it's not like a one size fit all thing, but I think we can't go wrong if we learn to love doing the work, like learn to love actually like um, doing the things that create the success versus
Mm-hmm.
the success itself, like not being so focused on like the money or the outcome, but actually the process,
Yes.
because entrepreneurship is probably the hardest game in, it's such a hard game in that the problems never stop. It's almost like it's this thing that creates problems and we're
Yeah.
paid to solve those problems. And
Mm-hmm.
so um I think, just it's knowing that and being patient, because it's like it's almost like being an athlete. Maybe the dynamics are a little bit different in that becoming a professional athlete, the failure rate is a bit higher, right? It's like 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 10. Like it's so competitive. and
Mm-hmm.
and business is also really, it's like, and also being an artist, right? So it's like an artist, an athlete, and an entrepreneur all understand rejection and failure in a very visceral way, because there's just no way to go on that path without experiencing that a number of times. And usually, like,
Right.
we always hear Michael Jordan got a cut from his high school basketball team when he was a sophomore. And I think there's just so many examples of greatness where there was a very, a major failure or a series of major failures that
Mm-hmm.
um, creates a certain um, relationship with pain that allows it to almost become like not personal, like depersonalizing it. And I think if we take things so personally in business and in life, it can create some tension. I can feel
Yes.
it, it can create a tension that maybe doesn't allow for like the longevity of like thinking long term. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that entrepreneurs also, people have to do, is think long term. And where that really relates in business and in life is in relationships, right? Like, with treating a customer like not just for a transaction in a single day, but over a
Yes.
long term period. And um, I think school doesn't, like I spent a lot of time in summer camps and growing up, and I would meet new people every week, and it wasn't just like it was always forming new relationships really quickly and then having those go away really fast.
Yes.
And just school itself, like I think it doesn't prepare people to be an entrepreneur very well, because it really does not promote failure, like a good relationship with failure.
Mm-hmm.
Failure is so frowned upon, and the goal is to get 100%. And the best we're going to do as an entrepreneur is like 300, 30%, right? Like it's like we're going to be right
Yeah.
30% of the time. So we have to be wrong 70% of the time. And how many people want to sign up for that? Most people want to be right 90% of the time. And
Right.
so, entrepreneurship, it's just, it would probably cause someone just to not make decisions because they didn't want to be wrong. And as an entrepreneur, we have to be wrong and just learn to hone our decision making process. And there's a whole rabbit hole that unloads on. But I
Right.
I don't.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, thank you very much. And I think the longevity will probably come, more if we focus on the two things you talk about, is serving your customer, right? And I forgot the other one. Sorry. But if you serve your customer and, let's focus on, I gotta make money, I gotta make money, I gotta make money, then it's better. It's a better way to go and to achieve success. I believe from what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a competitive advantage. Like,
Yes.
it's a competitive advantage to actually want to, like, because there's always going to be a place for someone that wants to solve someone else's pain. Like that
Yes.
there's always an opportunity there.
Yes.
Sometimes it can be hard to listen to really understand. A lot of times, like, myself, like, I had a vision of how I thought things were going to go, and it went way different than that. And me trying to hold on to how I wanted to go versus just really embracing reality and like accepting reality for what it was, like, held me back a lot.
Yeah. Because you think you failed because it didn't go exactly as planned.
Yeah. I mean, and what is failure, right? Like, I think failure is it not going the way that we didn't want it to go. But the more that we try to, like, the more I try to hold on to that versus just learning to flow with the universe a bit. I
Yes.
think there's, people that I've seen that have failed, like, in I think the way that you meant it, it always led them to something that was better.
Yes. It's true. And I can relate to that with prayer. When we pray for something, we don't always get the answer we were expecting, but the answer we get is usually better and lead us to better things. So, yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And leading into that, what is Parker grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today?
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I right now are on an adventure where we're able to travel, where we're doing some traveling, looking for home, looking to see where we find home, and grow our business. And so I spent in my entire life living in one city, until about 6 months ago, and I'm really grateful for the journey and the adventure and the choice that my wife and I made, and the opportunity to do this.
Awesome. I love that. I really do love that. And it's good that you have a partner you could travel with. That makes it more fun, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
um, eh, um, yes, there's it's an incredible gift.
Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So we talked about personal development. How does personal development relate to business success?
Yeah, I think it's foundational. The way that I look at my framework for this is essentially, there's different aspects of life for an entrepreneur. There's their business aspect, there's their relationships, there's their health, there's also their fun, and I think that's a part that sometimes gets lost in this whole personal development and business
Mm-hmm.
conversations, is like the role of fun in our life. And ideally, trying to make business fun, trying to make these different, obviously bring fun into our relationships. Sometimes we're able to bring fun into our health as well, like find things that we enjoy doing that are fun, that are also good exercise.
Yes.
But to me, what I keep on seeing is that the core is personal development. Like, at the center of that is personal development, and sometimes mental health. Like, I think there's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
conversation and relationship between mental health and this bigger picture. Um, but personal development to me is my language for it as well. And the more that we invest into our personal development, and what I mean invest is like energy, time, even money into our personal development, it increases the success that we can have in the other areas of our life.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. So I have one more question. Well, I have two more questions for you. But before you share with us how you can help someone, like share
Sure.
your work, I also wanted to ask you, moving on from the personal development, how can someone develop proper work-life balance? Because it's one of those buzzwords that we're throwing around quite a bit, and then it was poo-pooed, and but we know it's real. So tell us about that, and how can someone create that work-life balance?
Yeah. Um, I think this even relates to your last question around personal development, and I wanted
Yes.
to kind of add a little bit to kind of that to be more specific on, I think, on what your question was. So you might have to ask me the question you just asked me again. But I think some of this, like a foundational piece to this, also involves something called like having a growth mindset. There's a book
Mm-hmm.
written called Growth Mindset that was, very, I think, a bestseller and was very popular. And it essentially outlines it's a binary principle, which there's, I think, very few things in life that are like specifically like a binary principle, or binary options. But to me, this is, do you have a growth mindset or a static mindset? And so I think, if part of entrepreneurship and personal development and this whole kind of game is the willingness to grow and evolve as a person. And that sounds all fine and good, but usually that requires pain and discomfort. Like that's, that's the part of growth and evolution that doesn't get like talked about, I think, as much as like this is a really uncomfortable process. And so
Yes.
we have to become comfortable in that discomfort to, I think, to personally develop and evolve, as well as to grow a business and lead a team, and I think even, probably leading a family, like, is
Yeah.
probably, I think it's very challenging and probably painful, and there's some punches in the guts, but it's like rewarding and worth it.
Yeah.
um so that growth mindset piece, I think, is essential. And then one thing that I'm learning more about, that I think is like, that I use a lot, is turning negative emotions into useful, like into power for myself. There's so much, energy in a negative emotion, and rather than hiding from that, escaping or numbing, like using that negative emotion to help me to create what I want to create, to create change. And I think it goes back to the story piece, is like, usually that negative emotion is because there's a story, like we're telling ourselves a story, we're triggered, and there's this larger story that we're maybe not even aware of. um,
Yes.
and so I think learning to harness negative emotions for our own benefit is something that there's a lot of opportunity and leverage in from a personal development conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's
I,
pretty cool.
I
I'm really glad we got together to do this interview. Continue. I'm sorry.
no, I appreciate that. I likewise. I can nerd out on this stuff. Like, I think one of the most powerful ideas is like the power of accurate thinking. Um, one of my favorite books, says that the biggest enemy to evil is the power of accurate thought, and that really struck me. And so through our work, through my work, I've really tried to like think accurately about what personal development means, and as a result, we've created a framework that creates a way of looking at personal development, and like a sequence to grow within, and a way to identify the bottleneck, because that's one of the things that I think is relevant maybe for this discussion, is the importance of being able to identify like the bottleneck. Like, what is the challenge? Is the
Mm-hmm.
challenge, in business, is this a a marketing issue? Is this a sales issue? Is this a strategy issue? Is this a product issue? Like, is this a team issue? Is this like, there's a lot of different issues that can come
Yeah.
up in a business, but it's the same on the personal development side. Is this, Simon Sinek's really popular as this idea of like, start with why, right? And so, like understanding our why is part of it. And I think single moms can probably viscerally know why they're doing the game of entrepreneurship. And so, that, that would really resonate with me. Um and I think also just getting really clear, like for me, space is a really critical part of personal development that I don't think gets talked about. And I think space in this world is so like there's different elements of space. Our environment matters a lot. So that's like the first iteration of it is the physical environment, but also
Mm-hmm.
our internal environment, our digital environment. There's so much noise, and so many things that we can let in, and really taking ownership of our time, our calendar, like those pieces. One of the biggest, one of the most important habits that I do regularly for my personal development is reflecting on a period of time, usually a week, but it's almost like building a rhythm for reflection and planning so that we can learn from mistakes, from failures, to also learn from what's working and to improve the plan, improve the operations, improve the system, just
Yeah.
improve the way things are done, um, so we can trend towards what it is we really want, and who we really are, versus the noise, and what marketers want us to be, and what other people want us to be, um, and so that's something I think is like creating that space for ourselves, and then
Yes.
from there, like our beliefs, like really looking at like what are the beliefs that we have, and which one of those, like is there beliefs that don't serve us, because I think one of the things that doesn't get enough attention is like the unknown. Like there's things that are just like we don't like, or the unknown for us that we can't. It's like this unconscious incompetence,
Mm-hmm.
and so we need to be around other people that can help us see what that might be for us, what is holding us back, and share that with us in a way that we can hear it, and use it for our benefit, versus being upset or like defensive around that,
Yeah.
um because it's like biblical, right? Like it's Solomon, like don't cast pearls before swine. And when it's often very challenging to accept feedback, because it doesn't always feel good. It goes back to like growth and evolution, is like it doesn't feel good to do that.
Mm.
So that's one of the things that I think it can be a real challenge to like understand what is true and what isn't true, because sometimes people are going to say things that aren't true, that to manipulate us, or for their own agenda. And so that's why one of the most important things I think with kind of this whole game too is like buyer beware. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
because there's a lot of things in life that isn't what it seems, maybe, right? Or that person doesn't have our best interests at heart. And so I think we need to like trust but verify, and really do research too. Try to solve our own problems first, and then find people that can help, and be willing to invest, and make some mistakes. um, but I think at the end of the day, like one of the hardest things to figure out is like what is truly the question that we need answered. Like what is the question that you would invest $100,000 to answer?
Yeah.
You know, or 10,000. Like what's a question you'd invest $10,000 to answer? Like if we don't have those questions, then it's very difficult to answer them or get them answered.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. A lot of what you say is relatable to business and entrepreneurship, but so much of it is, you know, it resonates with someone who's been through divorce or, a bad relationship. So I appreciate your knowledge and your skill in delivering some real good, juicy benefits to our audience. Now, because of
It's my
that,
pleasure.
yeah, sure. I understand you have a business. And so tell us about your business. Tell us how we can reach you, including, your social handles.
Yeah. So I run a mastermind for entrepreneurs and executives called Junto.Global. Our website is Junto.Global. Um, it's an application or invitation only community, where we create a confidential space for people to talk about opportunity, the things that I mentioned earlier. And if we could be of service to any of your audience, I would be honored, or it'd be my pleasure. Also, I'm sharing more information on social media, and so you can also find me on Instagram as well.
Okay, and what's your handle on Instagram?
It's Zach_Parker_Harris.
Okay, and we'll put those links in the show notes. So thank you very much.